and gentlemen, though I don't see any ladies at the moment, but hopefully they're listening on. I am
gender balance problem, sir.
I am Lieutenant General Mukherjee. I am the president of the organization organizing this webinar, the Center for Eastern and Northeastern Research Studies. A little bit about our organization. We started off as a think tank in 2008 with General Shankar Roy Chowdhury, myself, General Arun Roy, and a few others, including some academics, some businessmen, Mr. Gopal Bhagat, then some IAS officers, IPS officers, and naval officers, Air Force officers. Just a small group of about 30, 40 of us. And we decided to set up this think tank aimed at educating people on the Northeast and the problems of India's Northeast. We conduct regular seminars and webinars in this region, all over the Northeast, in the state capitals and at other places. And we have been able to bring a fair amount of awareness, both to the state governments and the central government. After each webinar, we send a report to all concerned. We are not funded by anybody. We look after ourselves. The funding is by ourselves. Therefore, we are fairly free to speak our minds. And I would request all panelists to be free to speak their minds, because only then can we get some productivity in this seminar. That's all about SENESK. It's a wonderful organization. It's now recognized by the Government of India. And after this webinar, we would be sending a report to MHE, MHA, MOD, MEA, the Government of Manipur, the Government of Mizoram, and the Government of Assam, Government of Nagaland, which are the surrounding states, with the hope they would listen to what you all have to say. So far, we've been lucky. About 80% of our recommendations have been accepted by them. And I hope today you would also accept them. To the speakers listening on, I have an appeal. I am from the Assam Regiment. I'd like to pay my compliments and salute Colonel Sapam from my regiment, who spoke the other day on TV very openly, appealing to the Government of India to take some interest to sort out the problem in Manipur, which they failed to do. I feel the same thing. I also appeal to all my fellow ex-servicemen, some 60,000 odd in number, in Manipur State, to please bring sense to those militants and fanatical people from both the Meiteis and the Kukis to stop this violence. It's an earnest appeal, and I appeal on behalf of all panelists and all of us. Please stop this violence. Unless you cooperate, the violence cannot stop. A little about myself. I am from the Assam Regiment, 40 odd years of service with the regiment, and lived most of my life with people from the Northeast, which means both those from the Kuki, Chin, Mizo tribes, as also the Meiteis, and all other tribes and people from India's Northeast. I've lived with them all my life. I'm married to a Mizo. So I understand the problem. And therefore, I'm speaking from my heart. The incident of violence that has taken place since 3rd of May is all given in the concept note. To save time, I am not going to repeat any of that. I would request all panelists that this webinar is not as a blame game. Let us not try to blame anybody. Let us try and look for solutions only to the problem. And I promised the Army Chief and the Army Commander, Eastern Command, that we would give them a set of recommendations to try and help resolve things. I must, however, right from the beginning, clarify certain misconceptions. I'm a student of history in the Northeast, a very sincere and earnest student. So I would like to clarify certain misconceptions that there are related to history. Firstly, it is not just Kukis. Kukis form part of the entire Zo group of tribes. It means hill tribes. And that means people from the Chin Hills, people from Tripura, people from Churachandpur area of Manipur, people from South Assam, in Kachar Hills particularly. And people from Mizoram. What I would like to emphasize is that everybody's Kuki Chin tribes have been tracks during British 19th century, from the 11th century onwards. And there is proof of that. Secondly, the actual documented migrations into southern Mizoram and Churachandpur Hills started around 16th century, not in the 19th century that people are talking about. So let us stop calling them immigrants. They're not immigrants.
Absolutely.
They has owed a bunch of inhabitants as the Meitei or the Naga group of tribes, but they've been there a couple of 100 years. Let that be very, very clear. Yes, there has been some recent migration on account of the Tatmadaws' activity in the Chin Hills. But how many would it be? Into Mizoram is about refugees from Myanmar. At worst, Manipur would have got a similar number. The mistake the Manipur government has made is they have failed to register those people. In Mizoram, they've issued them identity cards and all, so they're identifiable. And after things cool down, they would go back. Manipur needed to do that and should do so now. The second misconception is related to the Meitei kingdom. Now, while the Meiteis control the entire area up to the Brahmaputra at some stage, from the river Chindwin to the river Brahmaputra, including Kachar Hills and so on and so forth, the fact remains the control over the hills and the hill tribes was only nominal. Nor was there a fixed frontier. Those were only frontier areas. And therefore, when they say the Kukis were not there till the British brought them in, is again a misnomer. The Zo tribes have been in Churachandpur Hills for many, many years. So that misconception is over. I've seen insurgency all over the Northeast. All of them have their roots in ethnic clashes. Whether you take the Boro insurgency, the Alpha insurgency, the Naga insurgencies, all have their roots in ethnic clashes. This is also an ethnic clash, what we're seeing going on in Manipur. However, I only pray and hope that it doesn't go into a full-blown insurgency. India's northeast has a history of continuous migration. It is still continuing even today and will continue for many, many years to come. However, due to this continued migration, resources are now falling short. And as resources are falling short, there are ethnic clashes, people competing for these resources. And at many times, the clashes are happening due to political mishandling. This particular case is also one of political mishandling. The Manipur clashes are over control over the areas surrounding More due to the drug smuggling and the drug traffic, and therefore the money that flows from that, which is thousands and thousands and thousands of crores, and being part of the Golden Triangle, smuggling of other items also. And in addition to that, to try and gain control over the land before oil exploration gets converted into extraction. And of course, the current ethnic issues, which is over the shortage of land. This has now been fanned by the politicians, the drug lords, and the Chinese. The Chinese have clearly been supplying weapons. The Meiteis
Hello.
One second. Thank you. The recent violence in May, even though I am not pointing fingers, as per all my sources, and I get a call almost every day from my ex-servicemen friends and people in authority, was initiated by the Meitei on political instigation and appears to have been state-sponsored. I hope I'm wrong, but this is what has been reported. The proof of that and the evidence is that the police allowing the Meitei extremists to loot armories. How else could it be done unless it was pre-planned? Houses were marked with red paint in order to indicate to the rioters what to burn down. And the failure of the state to take preventive action. I ask you, what was the IB doing or the other intelligence doing, and why were these not reported in time? These whole tribes have launched retaliatory action. Now both sides are equally to blame for the violence continuing. And that has to be brought under control. The Kukis are also now, the Kuki Chin tribes, these old tribes are asking for a separate administration and sacking of the present government. There is no doubt that some of the militant groups from Myanmar have also come in, whether it be Meitei or whether it be Kuki, adding fuel to the fire. Now, I'm not going to take any more time because the panelists must give their views, and you have the best bunch of speakers that India could offer with reference to those who have knowledge on the Northeast. I'll hand over now to Mr. Jayanto Chaudhary, former DGP ATSUM and DG NSG, and a very famous police officer from the Northeast with a tremendous reputation. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning to all. General Mukherjee has already introduced me, I think very generously. And my role here is only to act as a moderator. General Mukherjee's introductory remarks and the concept note circulated provide a detailed background to the current situation in Manipur. Our distinguished speakers today bring decades of experience at the highest levels of government, both at the center and the state. We also have several former ambassadors plenipotentiary who have seen conflict resolution efforts across the world. In addition, we are privileged to have with us top military commanders with extensive experience of dealing with conflict. Enriching this galaxy are renowned media personalities with an in-depth knowledge and networks in the region. All speakers have roots in the Northeast region, some in Manipur itself, either professionally, personally, or both. Now, it's unrealistic to expect a magic formula after a few hours discussion, especially since information on ongoing efforts by the center and the state government are not in the public domain. What can be hoped for are objective insights and pragmatic suggestions based on available information so as to contain violence, better organize relief for the displaced people, and to ideate a framework for confidence building measures. Now, there's naturally widespread anger among some of both communities who are thirsting for revenge. Among many others, there's a sense of despair. What's desperately needed is opening of a window, if not a door, not just for the Meiteis and Cookies, but all 35 communities of Manipur, to focus on common aspirations and to address identified differences in a spirit of give and take. We need to find a way to change the narrative to a future that promises net benefit of peace and prosperity to everyone in the state. Keep in mind that Manipur has one of the highest rates of unemployment and poverty levels. But at the same time, Manipur ranks among the highest in Niti Aayog's Innovation Index, which reflects the amazing creativity of its people. Also, that the state stands poised to be a gateway to Southeast Asia if the Act East policy takes off. As General Mukherjee said, the objective of this webinar is not a blame game. The past cannot be ignored, but the tragedy of the past 2 months shouldn't become an impossible roadblock. I therefore urge speakers to concentrate more on suggestions to contain further violence and to restore social equilibrium, both in the immediate and the medium term. After the keynote speaker, I suggest that other speakers limit opening remarks to about 10 minutes. The panel can then take up questions from participants. Anyone in the audience with questions, please post these in the chat box at any times. Emotions are running high, but for a meaningful dialogue, questions must maintain moderation in language and civility in tone. After the Q&A, speakers can make closing remarks for 5 minutes each or ask questions of other panelists. As moderator, my only role is to ensure a smooth flow of this dialogue. So, as a traffic cop, I reserve the undisputed right to signal stop and go to anyone at any time, even if our eminent speakers are the equivalent in reputation to Mercedes or an Audi. Just kidding. It's said that the longest journey begins with the first step. If the outcome of this webinar can help with finding this first step towards a path to peace, it will be a real service to one of India's most beautiful states with its talented and handsome people. Before I call upon Mr. Gopal Pillai, former Union Home Secretary, to deliver the keynote address, I ask all present to join in observing a minute's silence to mourn the victims of the violence in Manipur since May 3rd. Let us pray for peace. I will keep the time starting now. Right. So now I call upon Mr. Gopal Pillai, Mr. G.K. Pillai, former Union Home Secretary, who's our keynote speaker today, to share his thoughts. Mr. Pillai actually needs no introduction to the Northeast, so I will not go into his background. We all know him. Over to you, Mr. Gopal Pillai.
Thank you, Jayant. Let me first say that I'd like to express my deep pain and grief at the people who have been killed, whose properties have been lost, destroyed. Both communities have suffered greatly. Every life lost is a life which should not have been lost. And I have been extremely pained because I have friends from all the communities, and all of them have come with great stories about what has happened. We are not really going into a blame game, so I'm not really going into what, except that I think the state government has a certain element of responsibility for law and order. And to that extent, the state government has, shall I say, failed in its primary responsibility. I will leave it at that. I think the most immediate thing now, and I think, is to bring about an end to the violence and to restore peace. Because if killings continue, you are not going to you'll not be able to move any further. And along with this, what I see, the hate speeches or the poison that is being spread, let me say from both sides, has to stop. And I think the law enforcement agencies have to come down very hard. It doesn't matter who it is, whether it's a Meitei, it's a Kuki, or anybody else, on the hate speeches and those who are committing violence. That is something which the writ of the state has to be enforced to bring peace. That is the first. Because if you don't do that, then we really can't make the first step. The first step has to be a few days of which there are no killings, no violence, and you have a chance for sane voices to come. That's one of the first things that has to be done. The other thing which I see is on the rehabilitation and the compensation that has to be given to those who are suffered. There is still a lot of ambiguity. There's still a lot of people who have yet to get the compensation, who are yet, in fact, the rehabilitation itself is, in many cases, what I understand, some of the relief camps is not up to the mark. And therefore, this is an area where the state government, as well as civil society groups in Manipur and others, have to reach out and make sure that the relief and the compensation which is to be done, that package has to be very generous, and it has to be in the wide public domain. That will give a confidence to both sides that something is happening which will be for restitution, and how we'll come to other issues of people. At the moment, we are not even talking of, there's been an ethnic cleansing which has taken place from different areas in Manipur. We are not talking of either the Meiteis going back to Churachandpur or the others coming back and settling down in Imphal at the moment immediately, because that atmosphere for that has not yet come. But peace and the absence of further hate and poison has to stop immediately. It's one of the first things that has to be done. And to anybody who is indulging in this has to be dealt with very, very firmly. That's the first step, as I put it, to passing of the resolution, towards a possible resolution. Second, I've always been a very strong advocate of the maintenance of the territorial integrity of Manipur. So I think any solution which comes will be within the current territorial boundaries of Manipur. That, in one sense, should be the base on which further discussions will take place. There is a lot of information, there's a lot of misinformation which is going around. The opening speaker mentioned about the myths and the misconceptions that are there. Therefore, I believe that one of the first things that has to be done is some sort of what I call as fact-finding, a small committee being set up to look into issues on land, issues on the migration from Manipur, Myanmar, encroachments into the forest areas, looking at land survey, and then a population survey, because the census is still not done last year. So we get some basis of the next 2-3 months in terms of what is actually the physical position on the ground. My estimates are, and people who are on the ground, but the little sources that I have tell me that there are roughly about 60,000 Myanmar migrants who have come in because of the civil war there into Mizoram, and something like about 27,000 to 40,000 are in Manipur. So that is my estimation. People who are in the field in Manipur may have much latest figures. But irrespective of that, those who have come in from Myanmar in the recent past have to be treated as refugees for the time being, and have to be enumerated, treated as refugees, and documented as such. That I thought is one of the first things. If you can do that, a lot of the misconceptions and wrong facts which are coming, and this expert fact-finding commission should have not only representatives from the major communities, should also have people from outside Manipur itself. You should have 2 or 3 experts from the forest department, 2 or 3 other experts from outside who have the confidence of both communities to be able to give a fair and balanced approach to that. Even on the population, the basis should be, because the 2021 census is not there, would be actually the basis, the electoral rolls which are held on the basis of which the last elections were held. That would be the basis for using that as a base for seeing whether somebody is a migrant or he's not there. If you start this process, and if peace comes, if there's absence of violence, let me put it that way, where nobody is killed, nobody is injured, and you have a couple of weeks of that, and the hate and the poison which is there in social media and others is completely stopped, then I think you have a basis for which, and the rehabilitation takes place, you can then move forward to having what we call as the civil society groups, especially in Manipur. And I put it from both communities, start to move out and reach out among the people to try and bring about peace, that you need to find a solution within the boundaries of Manipur. This in one sense is the first step. what type of political solution you will have, whether it's a sixth schedule, whether it's a territorial council, whether it's any other form of administration which gives comfort to both sides, is something which is to be negotiated. There's a whole pile of historical debate and discussion, both in the Manipur Assembly and between the center and the state government, on what sort of autonomy can be given to the hill districts. And this is part of the ongoing negotiations which have taken place with the Naga groups for the last almost 2 decades, and where the state government have been consulted at different stages on how much autonomy they can give, etc. And I think that could form a basis for the discussions in the coming few months. But the most important criteria now is, as I mentioned, stop the violence, take action against those who are spreading poison and hatred on social media and others, and then on the relief and rehabilitation. The first level of confidence building is to be there, so that the message then spreads out that here is a government that is caring, a government that wants to find a solution, that is wants to look after its people, and then the rest of the issues come up. So I don't see at the moment, with violence continuing. Even yesterday there were killings, and this is something which is tragic, that after 60 days after the incident, you are still having these killings. It means that not enough work has been done by the both by the law enforcement agencies as well as civil society groups to try and put an end to what you call as the polarization of communities and the hate speeches which are taking place on both sides. I think I will stop here at this stage. I think if you can do just this much in the next 60 days, I think we have a basis on which we can then sit down and start talking about what are possible solutions.
Thank you very much, sir. That was, I think, a very reasoned and insight based on your experience of dealing with similar issues over the years. If General K.H. Singh is connected, may I request General K.H. Singh to share his thoughts?
Good morning, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Loud and clear, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. At the outset, sir, thank you very much for inviting me to this discussion, such an important discussion. And I thank each one of my co-panelists who are here, all respected elders. To begin with, in the next 10 minutes or so, my job is to cover, quote, I quote, aspects related to Manipur, causes of Meitei grievances, unquote. Before I come to the causes of Meitei grievances, I would like to just put across a point that I don't see the present conflict as kind of a law and order problem of the state itself.
Sir, may I intervene for a minute?
Yes, sir.
You're free, sir. You've spoken on many panels before on this also. You're free to speak on solutions if you choose to, since you're there, you're in Manipur. If you choose not to go into the background, you're most welcome to speak on the present and the future. Sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you, sir. My only point to introduce the subject, I don't see it as a law and order issue, much less as a communal clash. I see it little from the perspective of national security or even a regional security in view of the very unstable neighborhood that we have in the region. With that backdrop, I'd like to come to the issue of causes of the Meitei grievances. I do not know how far in history I should go back, but I would like to start from 1763. An agreement between East India Company and the King of Meitei. That time, 1763, Manipur was known as Meitei, the Kingdom of Meitei. In that document, it talks about not the boundary, but the territories of the King of Meitei in the southern banks of Brahmaputra in the north. I mean, these are in that document. And to the east, you have, up to the Sindhvin River, and to the west, up to the Kasar. I mean, this is what was generally documented in that document. So the idea, the first idea of Manipur, as is being, embedded amongst the Meitei people in particular, starts from their concept of what comprises Manipur, or that. And then thereafter, 1826, the Treaty of Yandabu, and 1891, when the British actually defeated the Manipuri army, and then virtually became kind of under the suzerainty of British Empire. Things start from here. When the British came, some kind of before that, in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, in the history of King's Chronicle, we call it that, where it has been documented for 2000 years of record, which was written sometime about 600 years ago, I think. In that it is written that, we must welcome Easterners and Westerners. When you say Easterners, primarily it was from Myanmar. And the Westerners, primarily after when the Mughals, there was the Brahmins and even some Muslims from Bengal, they were welcome. And it was written about 500-600 years ago. And that makes the Manipuri society, a composite kind of a Manipuri society till the introduction of Hinduism. So their idea of Manipur, which is embedded in the minds, begins with this. I'm giving this background for 2-3 minutes because this is extremely important. And thereafter came the Hinduism and Christianity in the early parts of 19th century. That they consider as the first issue of divide and rule policy. Let's now back to 1949, when the merger agreement was signed. Manipur from a kingdom, in fact, in the British Parliament, it is written as their record of Manipur is an alliance in the east of great significance, quote unquote. So after that, what happened is 1949, Manipur became a Part C state. I mean, from the kingdom of that territory, boundary, whatever, then it came to Part C state. And then 1970, it became a state in 1972 with Article 371C. When you have Article 371A in Nagaland, which empowers the Nagaland Assembly, 371 actually takes away the power of the Manipur Assembly. This is the third kind of a which is embedded in the minds of people. 371C actually talks about some kind of a separate arrangement for the hills, which in my opinion is not adequate given by the the realities that we have seen. So this is the beginning of the crumbling of what the Meiteis considered as the idea of Manipur. Then came, in the after independence, we had many insurgencies, demand for Naga limb, particularly starting from everyone knows about the NNC days, and then even till now. And then in the 1980s, we have certain chain cookie groups, again for some kind of a greater arrangement, Mizoram or whatever. So this is the second fear that they have in their minds now. That may, starting from southern banks of Brahmaputra, now they find confined to just a few kilometers of territory. This is the fear. I'm not saying that this is a reality which which cannot be reversed. And I agree with that. But this is a fear of the future. All conflicts of this kind actually starts with fear of the future, because if there is fear, there will be rumor. If there is rumor, there will be distrust amongst the people. So we come back, and then that fear that this kingdom of Erstwhile kingdom is being marginalized into a few kilometers here and there, where the present population density is close to about 1,050 per square kilometers. And you have the hills where the density is approximately 37 people population per square kilometer. So you have an imbalance there. So whenever there is an imbalance, there is likely to be kind of a stressful situation. The third issue that I would like to talk about is the identity issues. As you are aware, Meiteis, there are Christians, if you recollect, nearly 50% of the churches destroyed in the present crisis was of Meiteis, Meitei Christians, Meitei churches, almost 50%, maybe more. So there are Christians amongst the Meiteis. There are then indigenous faith, which has suddenly come up, up to maybe 30% or so of the population, and the remaining Hindus. So there is a thinking in the mind that who are we? I mean, there are multiple faiths and so much divided, which creates the crisis, and that is why people are looking for some constitutional protection. In fact, demand for ST definitely. In fact, more than half of the Meiteis opposed a demand for ST prior to this present crisis. I think the support will be more now. Meiteis definitely did not most prominent amongst people, and then at least 60% did not approve of ST demand. It was only 40%, because when they started looking for constitutional arrangement to protect their identity, they found that there cannot be any other constitutional arrangement except going under the umbrella of ST, at least to preserve what they consider as a little, whatever little is left of their idea of Manipur. And these were the fears, and these were the concerns of the identity issues and all. So now coming to the straight away, I have, I think, another 3 minutes or so. I will just quickly cover about the migrations and the forest land and all that. So if you go by the let's talk about the migrations and all. So what happens is, the figure may not be accurate, but it is close to accurate. What happens is, when there is a fear, as per 1901 records, 1911 or 1901, 1913, I may not be very correct in this as far as the date is concerned. When you look at the number of villages, people say that there were 232 villages in 1913 of the Kukichin, and then how is it that it is over 3,000 today, while the dead of Nagas have reduced? So this kind of a thought process, though I totally agree that Kuki villages are very small because of the customs which must be respected. So, but these kinds of things do play in the minds of people. And General Mukherjee and Mr. Pillai has spoken about the border management and the governance issues, narcotics, and also I will not repeat about that. But I would also say that only the last point as far as the governance is concerned, though the political majority, 39 seats are actually in the valley, that was when Meiteis were about 64% of the population. And today they're just about reduced by about 12%. That is come to about 52%. So because the fertility rate of the Meiteis have reduced below 2, and for a stable population, you require at least 2.1 fertility rate, while those of others have increased to 2.3. So that is another imbalance because of which this. And the governance, only about 15% of the these are all fears. These are not my statements, but these are all fears as concerns that we are talking about. Only about 15%, 15% of the bureaucrats above the rank of deputy secretary are actually Meiteis. 85% are all other tribes, and I'm talking about the joint secretary and above. So these are some of the fears, some of the concerns that Meiteis have. But I, for one, I believe that in a democratic society and in a changed atmosphere, we cannot be stuck onto the history all the time. We have to look forward, and how to address this, as all Jal Mukherjee and Mr. Pillai have actually come about. I am for hard measures to ensure that violence on both sides are suppressed with maximum force if need be. The only thing where I will caution is that no innocent people should be harmed. While the collaterals cannot be prevented, but collateral must be minimized to the level, and political, the center must talk peace and then force, I repeat, force the people to come together at a neutral place wherever it is. I think the center will have definite leverages to do so. And then when the two brothers fight, it has to be the elderly, the parents, who have to play their part. And sir, I have taken, I think, 1 minute extra. There is 11 minutes. And I will end here. Thank you very much for your patient hearing, sir. Thank you very much.
General, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your insights from the ground and so objectively put. Now I request Mr. Pachao Lamkunga, former Chief Secretary, Manipur, to share his thoughts. Mr. Lamkunga, can you hear me? Are you connected?
Yeah, sorry. I did not press on this speak button. Hello. Good morning, sir. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to participate in this high-profile panelist discussion on the situation of present Manipur, which is reeling under this social and political upheaval. I would like also express my gratitude to General John Mukherjee for taking a lot of trouble to organize this program. I am given 20 minutes to present my point, but I hope I'll be able to finish my presentation within 15 minutes or so. Yeah. We all know that Manipur has been in the news for the wrong reason for the last 2 months. And I can say without a fear of any contradiction that I am one of the emotionally hardest hit, because I spent the better part of my life in Manipur as a junior officer from 1981 till 2015. And I'll claim fair knowledge of the Manipur and its people, Meiteis and different tribes in the hills. So I am here to say whatever is in my mind, and I'll try to be neutral and have balanced view as far as practicable. So, Manipur has a long history, as General NHA has said, so I will not dwell upon the history of Manipur. I'll rather go straight to the present crisis and how we will be able to sort out this internecine war between Meiteis and Kukis. For the short-term measures, I would like to suggest a few points how we will be able to bring about peace and security and bring back the administration to its normal situation. First of all, I think that intervention of the third party is immediately required. As we are all aware, the peace committee set up by Honorable Home Minister of the Union has died an immature death. Why? Because it did not enjoy the confidence of both the warring parties, Meitei groups and tribal groups. The members included in the committee declined to participate in the deliberation because of many reasons, which I need not say in details. So I will strongly suggest that such a body as would enjoy the total confidence of both the party should be immediately set up. And the chairman and members should be totally from outside Manipur. I do not know who will be the chairman, who will be the members, but you may have better idea who will be. And I'll also suggest that reputed and renowned church leaders all over India should be co-opted. So this body should work out a roadmap and how to bring about peace and restore the erstwhile peaceful coexistence between the hills and the valley immediately. Number two is this: all party meetings should be held in Imphal under the chairmanship of a person no other than the Honorable Prime Minister. I suggest this because this type of a meeting in Imphal itself will send a very positive message to the people of Manipur, the entire Manipur, irrespective of the tribes or Meiteis. This gesture of goodwill will surely create a good atmosphere, friendly atmosphere, conducive atmosphere, that these two groups, Meiteis and tribal group, will readily come to negotiating table to trash out all the irritants and the problems that we are facing today. This is my second suggestion. If it can be implemented, am very sure, I'm quite sure, I'm doubly sure that the atmosphere of doubts and suspicion will be immediately removed. My next suggestion is that the problems of these refugees, especially in the Zoram, should be addressed immediately. Of today is, if I'm not mistaken, as per the paper report this morning also, we have in Mizoram around 12,000 persons who came here to seek shelter and refuge. A few of them are quite fortunate to live with their relatives and their friends, but majority of them are totally homeless and they are under the care of the local councils, YMA, and other NGOs, and they are being accommodated in makeshift huts and hutments. And giving them food and water and shelter is a very big task for a curved government like that of Mizoram. So I will suggest that government of India immediately come to the help of Mizoram in terms of financial assistance And I understand that Chief Minister Mizoram too has written to Government of India asking for financial assistance immediately to look after these unfortunate families who have come from Manipur. And next point is that to make these essential commodities available 24 hours. Now we know that national highways, two leading to Dimapur and another one leading to Jiribam, has been totally blocked. The report we received the day before yesterday was that they will be lifted, the blockade will be lifted. But we further understand that even if there is a formal announcement of lifting this blockade, these truckers and truck drivers did not dare to move because there is no assurance of security on the road. So till now, I think they are still stranded in the place where they have been staying for the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So Government of India and Government of Manipur should immediately ensure that essential commodities are made available to the people as early as possible. Otherwise, the future will not be very bright. People will go without food and essential items like gas, petrol, diesel, and other items. So another one is the Government of India may set up a shadow cabinet to look after the administration of Manipur. I think I will be right to say that at the moment, Government of Manipur is not able to look after the situation. And even the requisition of central armed police forces and army did not make much difference. Every day we knew that there was a problem in many lakeis and many areas, and there is a what they call unceasing shootout here and there, and some people died and some people are injured. And the running of the administration under this atmosphere is quite difficult for Manipur. We appreciate the steps taken by the government of Manipur to maintain law and order and to make all these essential items available and to bring about the peace and security. But the situation does not permit to have such a successful venture and intention. So I suggest that there is a body in the Government of India, a shadow cabinet type, to closely monitor the Government of Manipur's administration and help them, advise them, and suggest the best means how to run this administration and maintain law and order. These are immediate suggestions for restoring peace and security. These are short-term measures. For long-term measures, I will suggest a few points. Number one is speed up all the development works in Manipur, especially in the hill areas, in terms of this infrastructure development, village connectivities, telecommunications, school buildings, water supply, and everything. So these so-called hill and valley divide, we always say, had originated actually from the British time. As you read of the history of Manipur, we understand that during the British time in 1891, the administration of valley and hills were separated. President of the Manipur State Darbar, that was the Maharaja or King, was made in charge of the valley administration, whereas the hill administration was left to the vice president of the Manipur State Darbar, who was a British official. From there onwards, British people had created these hill and valley divide even in this administration. I do not say that this has resulted in the present problem. I do not say that. But this spirit of this hill and valley has always been there in the minds of the people, for good or for worse. I don't know. So we should uh, concentrate on the overall development of the hill areas. Immediately, it will be the responsibility of the government of India as well as the state government. And number two is that all the communities in Manipur, 35 tribes and majority Meiteis and Pangal, they should be treated as equal partners in all the development work under the Indian democracy. There should not be any discrimination against any community. There should not be created feeling of alienation in the minds of any community. So if there be such a semblance of feeling, this should be removed as early as possible. So now, Mr. Pillay, our former secretary, border management, has mentioned a little about the border management. I would like to say rather that border trade is also, I think, one part of this border management. I am the president of International Trade Initiative Forum in Mizoram, and I had an occasion to visit Zoukhothar Land Customs Station recently, and earlier in Manipur, while I was in Manipur, I frequently visited Land Customs Station in More. What we found was rather grim and very unpalatable. There was no sign of any development for the Land Customs Station in Zoukhothar. Only State Bank was functioning. No custom, no guaranteed place, nothing. So we have written to the PMO to immediately revive this border trade. As per the agreement of 1994, in which informal trade and barter trade was there. But in 2015, December, Reserve Bank of India had announced that only formal trade will be conducted between Myanmar and India through Zoukhothar Land Customs Station. This is on paper. There was nothing on the ground for reality. So I'll suggest and request the government of India and the responsible department and ministry to immediately implement all those schemes under this border trade agreement. As lastly, I will now try to conclude. In Myanmar, Manipur is at the gateway of Southeast Asian nations. Government of India is now taking many steps to have better relations with Southeast Asian nations. So the Manipur occupies a very, very important strategic position. So government of India, not only for restoring peace and security, even for overall development of the Northeast and to have better relationship with Southeast Asian nations, Manipur cannot be neglected. So government of India may kindly take up all the spending program and scheme for immediate implementation. Thank you very much, sir. These are my points. I
Thank
may
you,
not be very complete, but
that was absolutely very well described, short term and long term. You've actually put the thoughts down in such a systematic fashion. I'm sure this will be of great help. Now, I call upon our next speaker, Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay. He's been ambassador in Myanmar, Afghanistan, among other countries, and he is also son-in-law of Manipur. Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay.
Thank you, Jayanto. Thank you, General John Mukherjee, and all the other panelists and colleagues. I wasn't expecting to be called so quickly, but and I was actually hoping to avail of the time to put down my thoughts. But now you've preempted me, and I have to think literally on the spot. Firstly, I would like to thank and compliment, all our principal speakers so far, and in particular, General Himalay Singh and a former Chief Secretary of Manipur, Mr. Lompunga, for I think they're very sober and very balanced presentations, and I think also forward-looking presentations, and I think that's been very helpful. I've been asked to basically speak on the kind of Myanmar angle to the present conflict. And I would first of all like to say that, essentially there are four issues that I will touch on. One is the issue of migration. And there I would like to point out that clearly there have been a lot of refugees that have moved from the Chin state as well as from Sagaing division since the conflict started in Myanmar, that is from February 2021. And we can see that actually there's a big difference between the way the refugees have been treated and handled in Manipur and in Mizoram. And what makes that difference is the kinship and affinity that particularly the Chin community have with the Mizo, Zomi, Kuki communities in Manipur and Mizoram. Figures have been given, ranging, as Mr. Pillai said, from 27,000 to 40,000. I have been visiting that area quite often, quite frequently, and the last time as recently as January 2023. And there was also a survey done by a minister of the Biren Singh government, Mr. Letkau Haokip, status of the migrants and so-called refugees in Manipur. And I think the figures that range from 25 to 40,000 are highly exaggerated. In fact, the Manipur government, taking the cue from the central government, was extremely unreceptive to refugees from Myanmar right from the beginning. They issued orders, orders that they should not be accepted. And there, I would like to say that, let's take a kind of counterintuitive, just take a hypothetical situation. Had the refugees been of ethnic Meitei origin, had they been so-called the Kathe, who inhabit Myanmar, would the reaction of the Manipur government have been different? Because then, as far as the Manipur majority community, the Meitei community is concerned, they would have had that same ethnic kinship that the Mizos have with the Kuki-Chin refugees on that side. So clearly, there is a degree of discrimination, and that degree of discrimination is based on the idea of who constitutes Manipur state, which are the people that constitute the Manipur state. And there's a prior kind of a priori categorization that Meiteis and Nagas are indigenous, but somehow the Kukis are not indigenous. Now, that's a matter of history, and I don't want to go to it, but I'm just saying that there's a cognitive classification which separates the Kuki-Chin from the Meiteis, as a result of which the refugees are considered to be outsiders, whereas they are not considered to be so much of outsiders in Mizoram. And had they been factually Meiteis, they would not have been considered so-called unwelcome refugees in Manipur. Second point, there is a big gap in our refugee law. Since we simply do not have the category of refugees, as a result of which anyone who crosses over from Myanmar, regardless of who they may be Burma or they may be Chin, are automatically defined as illegal immigrants or violators of the immigration law. By the way, the immigration law applies equally to everyone. It is non-discriminatory. Whereas I think the kind of solutions that we are looking at now, including the NCR, are ipso facto discriminatory. There is, for someone who actually crosses over for any reason, whether it's for migration or it is for to flee persecution, we have no system, let's say, for example, like an FRRO, a Foreigners Registration Office, where somebody can report and say, all right, I have come here and I need temporary permits to stay. Similarly, there is no office of the UNHCR where they can apply for refugee status. So the person who is fleeing persecution lands up in Manipur or Mizoram in a kind of nebulous state with no status and no papers and no definition in terms of the category of. I'm getting a call, so I'll So this is another issue that has to be looked into, and this whole issue of refugee law. Next is the issue of trade. I'm very thankful to Mr. Longkunga for bringing up this thing, because what has happened from the switch from border trade, which was clearly regulated, to and even then there were violations of the border trade agreement. The switch from the border trade to most favored nation trade that took place in 2015, actually almost without any consultation by the Ministry of Commerce at that period, has not been complemented by the erection of suitable customs offices. As a result of which, there has been a massive spawning of what is called informal trade, and along with informal trade, also contraband and illegal trade. This means that, for example, a commodity like betel nut, which used to be regulated under the border trade, now is coming in freely across the borders, both in Mizoram and Manipur. And there is a huge kind of vested interest, and there's a huge business in betel nut, which is simply not levied any duties or taxes. And one has to ask the question that in spite of the integrated check post in Moreh being inaugurated in 2018 and by the Prime Minister, virtually in 2019, you have a situation where, all these products, including Chinese products, Thai products, Korean products, legal products, illegal products, the drug trade, I will come to it. All these are part and parcel of this kind of undue trade. And clearly, we need to examine and investigate who are the people profiting from it and what are its linkages with the present conflict. Drugs, again, this is a very, very sensitive subject. And again, not enough is known. So I would put these as items to be investigated. Clearly, there has been a mushrooming of poppy growing in Manipur over the last 4 or 5 years. I think the war on drugs has contained it to some extent. There is some amount of processing of the poppy within Manipur. I think more than the poppy growers, we need to look at the drug financiers who provide the capital for poppy cultivation and who provide the perverse incentives for poppy cultivation. There are 3 strands of this trade. There is one strand of the trade, which is the poppy, which is processed and consumed and processed and perhaps exported. A second strand is the entire trade in precursors, which goes from India to Myanmar and comes back in terms of synthetic drugs. And the third strand, which is very interesting, is the hotspots, the poppy hotspots that the UN Drug Control Agency has identified. One just south of the border at Behyang, across the border between Chikha and Tonzang, a hotspot where, in fact, when the government of India put pressure on the Myanmar army, on the PLA and other Meitei valley-based insurgents, the Myanmar army actually relocated a lot of the Meitei insurgents to this area. So there's a kind of coincidence between the hotspot and the relocation. And more importantly, in my view, and my hypothesis, my guess, informed guess, is that the trade in drugs, the trade in processed heroin coming in from Myanmar into India through these points is probably much greater. And the involvement of many influential people from various communities in Manipur is now well documented. There have been several seizures. People have been busted. And in fact, in some cases, they have also been released under instructions from high authorities inside Manipur. And finally, the issue of cross-border support. So far, I believe that cross-border support for militancy on both sides has been limited. There has been some, almost certainly it's logical to expect that, let's say, the Zomi populations would help the Chin in trouble. And today, if the Mizo, Zomi, Kuki populations are in trouble, one should logically expect that there could be some reverse help as well. But we are also seeing, cracks and fragmentation within it. There are long-standing ties between the valley-based insurgents located in places like Kalay and other places in Myanmar with the military junta, particularly at the lower levels. And in many cases, those units have been used against the Chin PDFs in the internal Myanmar war. And one can expect that today, if there is conflict in Manipur, there could be some reverse kind of assistance as well. And the last point I would just quickly leave, I hope I have not exceeded my time, Jointo, is that, we should be really mindful now, because the populations of this area, the tribal populations, are all cross-border. And what happens in Manipur is going to affect the cross-border populations, whether it's in Bangladesh or in Mizoram or in Myanmar. And we should be very, very guarded that there is no spillover of the conflict across state borders and across international borders. Because if that happens, we have a very serious regional conflagration. You have Kuki-Zo populations in Nagaland. You have Kuki-Zo, a common ethnicity in Mizoram. You have Kuki-Zo populations in Assam and other places. And if this spills over, particularly into Assam, I dread to imagine what the dynamics could be transformed into. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gautam. That was simply a very, very wide range that you gave us, and I think we'll be grateful to you. Now, Mr. Subir Bhaumek is actually iconic in the Northeast. Everybody knows him, and not only because of his time with the BBC, but because of his reporting, insightful reporting earlier and even now. May I request Mr. Subir Bhaumek to share his views? Subir, I think you're on mute. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Thank you, Jointoda. I had, muted myself because I have to speak to several other people on the sidelines. Anyway, thank you, Jointoda. Thank you, General Mukherjee. And thanks all my previous panelists, particularly Gautam Mukhopadhyay, who I have always closely interacted with. Several very important points have been made, and I don't want to repeat because there is time. And of course, Pillai sir, who's just popped up again on the screen. We've known each other for a long time. Let me straight away come up with the recommendations first. It's a very American way of doing things. You make an argument first, and then, of course, you check it out. But let me come up with a recommendation, which basically is my argument. The first thing I would insist on is restoration of governance. General Mukherjee actually and very correctly alluded to this complete failure of governance and actually complicity of a certain section of administration with its rioting. And I don't want to repeat what he had said, but I would say that action against those policemen who have colluded with rioters, given out weapons, I repeat, given out weapons from state police armories, have to be brought to book. They can't get away. And instead of making a joke of the whole government, by putting up drop boxes, please drop your weapons back here, no action taken. If I run away with a weapon from a police armory or anybody else, in law and order service, I'll be booked under Arms Act. And you are asking these people to drop back weapons, no action taken. This is a bloody joke. And I'm using this word bloody very consciously here to emphasize the point and not to abuse anybody. So the police officers, now we all know from which armory how many weapons have gone out. Please ask, instead of setting up drop boxes and making a joke of the administration, please ask those officers in charge of those armories or police stations from where the weapons have gone. Chaps, you have given out these weapons. You got to get them back. And we are giving you 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever be the time frame, 5 days, 6 days, 1 week. But you are the guys. This armory was under your watch. These weapons have gone out. It's your job to bring them back. Don't expect Assam Rifles and Army to, look for needles in the haystack. These chaps exactly know who they gave the weapons to, so they will make a couple of calls to all those people who got these weapons, bring them back. And if you can't do that, give out the names of those guys to whom the weapons were given. At least do this, so that the Assam Rifles and the Army does not have to run about like headless chickens looking for a needle in the haystack. So this is a governance issue, And this has to be very firmly sorted out. As Himalayan Singh was also saying, very tough action has to be taken against these people who have erred in the line of duty. I'm not a soldier, but I'm a Rimkolian, and I'm half soldier, you can say. And I believe that police or army or any law enforcer who has lost the pride of the uniform does not deserve to be there. He has to be thrown out. So action against these chaps who did these kind of things and who actually promoted the rioting by giving out weapons, any community have to be punished. This is a governance issue. It has to be sorted out. I don't want to go into the relief, rehabilitation bit of it. Enough has been said about that, and I agree with the suggestions. The second thing that I want to make, people talk about poppy cultivation. I'm a farmer myself. I've done rice, I've done rubber, I now do spices in my land in Tripura. And the foothills have become more important for me than the flat wetland where rice grows, because rice does not give me any profit. It's just, good enough as a sustenance crop. Now, you don't do any agricultural extension work in Manipur. Look at Tripura, what it does. From the 1980s, systematically, tribal farmers, tribal peasants have been encouraged to go for commercial crop cultivation like rubber first, but rubber has some problems, environment impact and all that. Now spices, and we find a ready market next door in Bangladesh where spices are in great demand because the Mia Sahib has to have spices for his gosht, right? So let me talk about this issue, crop substitution, because these crop issues, the farmer issues get left out in most of our middle class, upper middle class discussion because people don't understand the farming issue. Mr. Buddha Bhattacharya did not understand this, got into huge trouble at Singapore. So let me, as a farmer, practicing farmer, by choice and by background, insist that Manipur government, instead of war against drugs, destruction of poppy fields, why do these people do poppy? Because they can't do wet rice cultivation as is possible in the valley land. So in these undulating hills, they go for poppy because the government agricultural extension has done nothing to give them any idea of gainful crops which they can plant and get a decent income. So this is a livelihood issue. You have to decide on this before you say all cookies are poppy cultivators and we smash their poppy plantation. Do smash the poppy plantations, but please give them alternate crops to plant so that they get a decent livelihood. And unless you have done that, you don't deserve to be called a government. As far as the migration issue, I fully agree with Gautam Babu that it's unfair to brand, and with John, that it's unfair to brand all cookies as migrants. No, they have been in the kingdom of Manipur for times immemorial. But it's true because of the continuous conflict in Myanmar since the 1980s, and it's not a yesterday phenomena. It's not just linked to this coup. Since the 1980s, this continuous pro-democracy movement, rise in ethnic organizational activity against the central government, this ongoing civil war in Myanmar, I don't have to detail it because I'll keep going on and on if I have to, because I've lived and worked in Myanmar and I speak the language. The thing is, here, it's very important that the government in Manipur failed in its duty not to register the refugees who came in. And I fully agree with Gautam when he said, if the refugees are Meiteis, they would be, treated well. They are cookies, so they are the other guys. And it happens everywhere. Yeah. So when a Bengali refugee comes in from into Tripura, which is Bengali majority, he is welcome. If he goes into Assam, he's an outsider. Bohiragato, Kheti Bolage has to be thrown out and all that. And I don't want to detail these. These are all well-known positions. Thing is, the registration of Burmese migrants who have come in, especially after the latest round of conflict which started with the February 2021 coup, this is something the government in Manipur has not done. They have to do it now. Maybe it's late in the day and people may have mingled around and gone away, but there has to be an effort rather than floating all kinds of funny figures. Somebody says 40,000, somebody says 60,000, and this is the culture which BJP started since the days of the Assam agitation. L.K. Advani says 1 crore Bangladesh is in Assam. Somebody says 40 lakhs. What is the basis for all this? I want to know the basis for all this. So here, let me make it clear. I support the cause of registration of Burmese migrants, but I firmly oppose the trend that everybody, all cookies, all chins, they're outsiders. You need to check on that carefully. So clear differentiation between refugee, internally displaced person, and economic migrant has to be made here. This is a tough exercise, but it has to be done rather than, run a sort of, paint over everything and expect everything to fall in place. The last point I will make up is I firmly oppose 3 things. The NRC, it has been a disaster in Assam. It has been a witch hunt. And now the man who promoted it, Hemanta Biswa Sharma, was most enthusiastic in promoting NRC, is now saying NRC has to be done again. Is it a joke? Indian taxpayer money to satisfy somebody's egos, whims, and fancies. So this cannot be done. It has failed in Assam. Upgradation of electoral roll in a proper, dutiful, and scientific manner is the need of the hour, so that you can exactly weed out unwelcome foreign illegal migrants, and you can actually do justice to, the sons of the people who live in Manipur. And the son of the soil theory, Myron Weiner, Assam agitation time, I strongly oppose this. If I am an Indian and I am from Tripura, now settled in Calcutta, I had a house in Assam. Now in Assam, somebody calls me Bohiragato. What Bohiragato? I am an Indian and has the right to settle in Assam or Manipur, as any of them has a right to come and buy a property in Calcutta. So this Bohiragato, outsider, illegal migrant, loose use of these terms, which has now become a political fashion, has to go out of the window. And I strongly oppose this. The last thing I will say is, I strongly oppose the breakup of Manipur. No further breakup of any northeastern state and creation of unviable new states. But I strongly support the cause of tribal autonomy, which, look, and here I bring the Tripura example. At the peak of 1980 ethnic riots in Tripura, Nipen Chakravarti, and I respect him very much, made this announcement that we will give tribal autonomy. We will bring 6th scheduled district council and for the tribals. Now in Tripura, you have 70% of the land area under this district council for 30% of the state's population. Fair enough. The indigenous people, this is justice done. Now in Assam, people learned from mistakes, took a lot of time, and finally, they had to agree to tribal autonomy as a way of saving the breakup of Assam. So you have Bodoland Territorial Council, you have similar councils in Dimasa, Karbi, and other areas. Tribal autonomy is not a bad thing, as many of the debates on Manipur recently has made it out to be. And we know who are the people who said that. One JNU professor said that if tribal autonomy, leads to a council creation, he will stand with a gun. And he's a JNU professor. What kind of people these people are? And he's a PhD. The point here, and let me make, is I strongly support the cause of tribal autonomy, because tribal autonomy creates stakeholders in the system. And therefore, if the cookies and the Nagas were to get effective tribal autonomy under 6th schedule, and 6th schedule may also be reviewed to extend the scope of tribal autonomy. In that case, this tendency to ask for separate state independence, this will vanish. So I strongly support the case of effective, workable tribal autonomy, but I oppose the breakup of Manipur. And I also want the living space problem of the Meitei population to be seriously addressed, because that can be addressed only from the economic point of view, better employment, industrialization, better, economic growth, infrastructure building, and all that stuff. Unfortunately, I know chief ministers and governments in Manipur since 1980s, and they're in the same mold of, instead of creating jobs, they're just about managing jobs and giving somebody a job, making transfers, making money out of it. This has to stop. There has to be an agenda of economic development, which alone can sort out this living space problem of the Meiteis. And if they're gainfully employed, much of the angst and anger they have against the system will go away. Last request. This is a Meitei cookie issue. Please don't make it a Hindu-Christian issue. As I've seen some tendency, this new saffron atmosphere in the country, making it a Hindu-Christian issue. Disaster. Meiteis are Hindus, yes, we know. But that has not stopped Meitei boys from going to China, getting trained, and coming back to fight against the Indian army. How do you explain that? How do you explain Namai Rakpam Bisets or saying, Kunjo Bihari saying, Pemba saying all this, blue-eyed Manipur is going to China in 1976 and becoming Ojals as pioneers, coming back as pioneers of insurgency. So, don't make this a Christian-Hindu issue and don't add to the complexity of the problem by bringing in a religious factor here, because that can be disastrous. Thank you very much. Hello.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bhaumik. Thank you so much. As usual, you have, with a no holds barred kind of an approach, you have placed everything square in front of everybody. And I think most everybody in the panel and others who are listening in are in tune with what you have said. Our moderator, Mr. Chaudhary, is off for a few minutes. In the meanwhile, I am just taking this on for the time being. Our next speaker is Ambassador Ralte. May I request Ambassador Ralte to share his thoughts with us.
Thank you. Do we need to mute that? Oh, it's already muted. Then where am I getting the feedback?
We can hear you, Ambassador Ralte. We can hear you clearly.
Yeah, no, we're getting feedback over here. Yeah, just 1 second. Yeah, there is.
May I also just intervene for a minute? May I just also mention that the moderator, if you would have noticed, in the program that we had given, there has been a slight shifting of the panelists. This has been done to accommodate people who had to opt out because of the prior commitments that they have had. And should there be a little problem with somebody whose name I am taking for the next 2 or 3 panelists, please let me know and we'll shuffle the names. Thank you. Ambassador Ralte, you're on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, senators, for inviting me. I feel quite diffident because I'm not that knowledgeable in my about my own area because I've been out of the area since for over 50 years. But that also gives me an opportunity to look at it from a perspective of an interested outsider in that way. So I will try to be more objective than emotional, but I will not dwell much on the Manipur issue itself, although we are talking on Manipur. But let me start with small, brief glimpses of how we see the Zou identity, whether it is Mizo or whether it is Zou-Me. So even as students in college, we always had this problem, whereas our cousins from outside of the Mizoram limited area didn't want to call themselves Mizo, but they wanted to call themselves Zou-Me, but they wanted to be a part of the Zou, what we call Nathak. Nathak means descent. So we always had this question, and there are some Mizos in Mizoram who say they don't want to be Mizo also, so why should we bother about them? Let us not worry too much about them. But there are others who have created organizations that want to unify all the Zou, Nathak, descent people into one integrated boundary. So there are things going on within the Zou community also. Now, this group They want to bring in everybody from Bangladesh, Myanmar, Manipur, Assam, Tripura. They want to bring them all into the grouping of Mizoram. Of course, that's just one group. So, given all this, there is definitely a big feeling for the Mizoram people, for the Zhou people in Manipur, whether they are the ones who want greater integration or those who want to maintain their own separate identities. So there is another problem that has added onto this, as Mr. Bhomik said. People have brought in the religious factor, which has brought in the communal feeling. Now, when that happens, even the Mizos who say let the Zos suffer, because they don't want to be part of us, why should we support them? Even those kind of people start worrying that those are our ethnic people, and they are suffering not because they are ethnic people, because they're suffering because they are our Christian brothers. So it adds a dimension that religious, I would say, fanaticism. That adds a different dimension, and it brings in a different perspective to the issue. So whether it's because of the communal feeling or because of the ethnic feeling, it doesn't matter now. So in Mizoram, as speakers before me have said, we have a refugee problem. We have a refugee problem from our east, from our north, and from our southwest. And we are a small population. We are the highest subsidized state from the center. For every 100 rupees of tax, I believe we receive 4,000 rupees. That is how highly subsidized we are. We're the highest subsidized state, and therefore, and we have refugees coming in from international borders as well as internal problems. And so far, there has been no support from the center. Why? As Ambassador Mukhopadhyay said, we do not have refugees. We only have illegals if they are coming across the international borders. What about our internally displaced people? They are the responsibility of our states. They are the responsibility of our central government. To my mind, to whatever I have seen, I have not seen any document or proclamation saying that the central government has given so much for helping the internally displaced people. And we are 60 days plus from the day it started. It's, I mean, for somebody like me who work for the government, who sent aid all over the world on behalf of the government, it's a bit sad to see this no movement coming from the center. So what happens? Even the state government is unable to pay its employees, government servants, on time. It has to wait for certain amounts to come in from the center before it can pay the salary bills. So in that situation, the state government also does not have money to give. So who gives? Well, the people of Mizoram, they give, the NGOs. Since the government cannot accept that we have refugees, it's the NGOs who have been bearing the brunt of the refugees from the east and from the southwest international borders. And now that we have the additional problem of our northern brother, families, villages have come across. And some villages have built separate villages for this people who have come down. And some of them want to work, but there are others who, even if they want to work, there is no work. So it's the people who have to sustain. How long can the people sustain? Christian charity and Mizo fraternity, yes. So, but the question is, how long can it happen? This is the question that a lot of us are looking at. So we need to have some action. Well, it's not a lot of people, as we said. Only about 12,000 from across the northern borders, and not too many on the east either, and just a few thousands in the southwest. So the government can give the state or the NGOs some aid in some form or the other. Now, there are questions that are being raised locally on why, how, what is the issue in Manipur, and the actions that have been taken to bring peace. Now, from all reports from day one, the chief minister was implicated as one of the people that might be having some forces who were taking action against the cookies. Now, he was made the chairperson of the peace committee. I think we need to be a bit more imaginative on such kind of a thing. So that whoever constitutes peace committees should, as my predecessors have said, constitute a peace committee that comes from outside, but who could have influence over the different groups, ethnic or communal groups. And so let's be a bit more imaginative on how we do that. So the center needs to be a bit more proactive, and they should realize that one side of the problem will not accept the present chief minister. So there needs to be intervention from outside. Without that, I don't think we can even talk about restoring law and order or peace, because one side will not accept. Now, as to the causes, poppy cultivation, smuggling issue, big money. I believe that the ladies group of CPI who had visited also brought out the issue of petroleum and gas. So it's not just an ethnic issue, but they have brought in the communal issue also. But is that hiding something? So the fact-finding committee really needs to go into those areas. Is it an issue of illegal funding of poppy cultivation? Is it an issue of who is gaining from the black markets? Whatever may be the cause, Mizoram is definitely facing the consequences of the issues of Manipur. A major one is the issue of the drug trade. Since the drugs cannot go through Manipur for now, Mizoram has now become the conduit. And well, you might say that these are all for other places where it is more lucrative. But when you carry water in a bucket, it tends to drop. And it is dropping. And the price of number 4 heroin on the street has dropped It has been dropping since Myanmar refugees have been coming in. And it has, in the last 3 years, they say the drop has been tremendous, even more. And so now we can almost buy a shot for the price of a cigarette packet now. And it's available on almost all street corners. Some people who went across the border a few months back said it's available like in a pan shop. Pan is available, so it's almost every shop has the stuff. So it's with the porous borders, we have this major problem coming in. So what is the other upshot? The group that wants to have integration of all mesos into one unit. So they are now also having a great time, saying now is the time to unite. So there's a danger that one little problem in Manipur could spill out into Mizoram, Tripura, Bangladesh, and Myanmar also, and Assam, wherever there are ethnic Zo people around. So we need to nip the Manipur bud now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm back. Now thank you, Ambassador. That was a very different perspective. Now I may request Mrs. Samir Purkaisto, who has wide contacts, I know, all over the Northeast, and who visits very frequently, to share his views and his perspective. Mr. Purkaisto.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks to the Sinarske for having me here. My brief is to discuss the fallout of this current conflict in Manipur on Nagas and Nagaland. But before I dwell on that, let me share my thoughts as to why this identity war has a larger lesson for the country. Manipur, and for that matter, Northeast, is no stranger to such kind of conflicts. As a journalist covering the strife-torn region, I myself have had the misfortune of seeing many of this human insanity from close proximity, starting from Naga-Kuki clashes in 1993-95. Last month, I visited Manipur to cover the present unrest. What I saw this time, what Manipur is witnessing now, is unparalleled, even in the long history of violence in Northeast. I know old-timers will point out that Naga-Kuki clashes claim far more lives. For the record, around 1,000 people were killed in the clashes that lingered for more than 2 years. And the ripple effect continued for a couple of more years. So, but we need to remember that even during that period of mayhem, the society was not as balkanized as it is today. The killings were mainly carried out then in the 90s by militant groups. Political and community leaders on either side of the divide had been constantly trying to stop the carnage, sending peace and goodwill missions. So that was the situation way back in 90s. But this time, it is the civilian population who have taken up arms, looting from police armories, as some earlier speakers also pointed out. Militants have pitched in only at best as force multipliers. The civil societies, political leaderships, and even intellectuals are deeply divided on ethnic lines, which was not seen in any of the conflicts in the region before. They are often seen provoking innocent civilians with their irresponsible and insensitive comments instead of creating a bipartisan shield against these mindless killings. The situation has come to such a pass that even elected representatives of Kuki and Meitei communities are not willing to see eye to eye. This deep-seated mistrust and hate are the outcome of constant politics of identity and polarization. It has not, something that built up overnight. the present BJP-led Manipur government had been pushing in the past few months this stereotype, this polarizing policies, stereotyping one community. A narrative has been spawned that majority Meiteis would soon be outnumbered by Kuki population because of the influx of the community, Zo Kuki community from across Myanmar. This theory is propagated based on speculative figures. Nobody knows what is the exact figure, but we can get some hints of what could be the number from special drives carried out by the state administration for verification and identification of illegal migrants. And this drive could detect only 2,186 illegal migrants as on April 24. And these are state government's own estimate. So from this figure, this figure clearly shows that this number certainly is not big enough to change the demography of the state. And this is one narrative. Then another narrative which has been peddled for the last few months are that cookies are heavily into drug trafficking as well as poppy cultivation. But this narrative is also, not correct. The presence of valley-based gangs such as Itochai International Drug Cartel clearly negate the narrative that drug trafficking is the monopoly of only one community. But we have not seen any proactive stand of the state government against this drug cartel in this so-called war against drugs. So overall, this stigmatization created a sense of insecurity and alienation among the cookies on one hand and gave rise to assertion of Meitei identity on the other. The growing pressure on limited land and resources, as many of the previous speakers pointed out, further accentuated the divisive narratives. What followed on May 3 was the volcanic eruption of the pent-up fury that the two competing emotions formed in the minds of common people. So in a way, what we are seeing in Manipur, this violence is the reflection of the time we live in. Our society is increasingly becoming polarized, turning into power cakes, waiting to explode. And this situation is unfortunately not limited to Manipur. We see everywhere this kind of polarizing narratives being pushed. And the way it exploded in Manipur should serve as an eye-opener for all those who indulge in divisive politics of identity and polarization. It is far easier to provoke emotion than to control it. And this Manipur violence has shown us again. Now, this uncontrolled emotion is, as we all know, are like misguided missiles that can go haywire anytime, escalating the conflict. And amidst this, there are also attempts by vested interest groups to project this ethnic conflict as a communal strife between Christian and Hindus. And this narrative against can have far-reaching consequences in the entire region, particularly in the Naga areas of Manipur and also in Nagaland. Nagas were almost, were almost drawn into this conflict, actually, on June 18, when a Naga house was burned down by the Kuki miscreants at Limakong, Chingmang. And the incident had evoked sharp reactions from Naga groups, including NSC and IM. Warnings were issued and all those things. Naga organizations had, that it was not an isolated incident. Earlier, a Naga village, Lungiram, too, was what they call deliberately targeted and fired upon by the Kukis despite knowing it was a Naga settlement. That was of course the allegations of the Naga group. But these kind of small incidents can spiral of this conflict, and then it can spill over to Naga areas. Fortunately, the situation was not allowed to flare up due to the timely intervention of Kuki Inpi and Indigenous Tribal Leaders Forum. And fortunately, Nagas continues to maintain neutrality in the current conflict. And as we know, a civil society team from Nagaland, under the banner of Nagaland Joint Christian Forum, had visited Manipur. A 30-member team of the comprising members from various civil society organizations had gone to Manipur, and they visited Imphal yesterday, and they offered to mediate between the two conflicting communities. This is, but in this charged atmosphere, we don't know how whether whether they will really succeed in their mission, because the situation is so charged up. Even the previous peace mission failed to take off. So, but nevertheless, this is definitely a praiseworthy initiative of the Naga civil society, and Nagas particularly so, because Nagas definitely has a stake in this conflict. And the community, they participated in the May 3 Tribal Solidarity March to oppose the demands of the Meiteis for the ST status. Nagas, like the Kukis, are against the inclusion of Meiteis in the ST list. And even the Kuki tribal bodies and political leaders initially mulled raising the demand for a separate administration comprising all the hill districts. They wanted to bring in the Nagas into this larger administrative umbrella they are now demanding. In a meeting in Aizawl on May 17, they had proposed to hold consultative meetings with Naga tribal bodies over this separate administration demand. The idea, however, could not be taken forward, as Nagas did not want to get involved in any issues that will overlap with the framework agreement the NSC and IM signed with the government of India in 2015. But Naga factors will get more prominence, however, when an effort is made to resolve the current conflict by granting autonomy to the Kuki areas without disintegrating Manipur, as many speakers has also pointed out. And this seems to be the only viable option right now, because without that, it appears very difficult to solve this problem. Some autonomy needs to be given to the tribals, particularly the Kukis, at this juncture to resolve this problem. But that will be not very easy, and it won't be an easy quick fix solution, because there are overlapping of Naga and Kuki territories in hill districts, particularly in Kangpokpi and Chandel districts. So this can again lead to more complications unless and until all the stakeholders are consulted, roped in. So any hasty decision will may create further problems, and this conflict may get spill over to Naga areas. But as I said, as the situation stands today, it will be very difficult to restore normalcy in Manipur without granting some autonomy to the Kuki areas. And if the autonomy is given to the Kuki areas, the similar arrangement should be made for the Nagas, and the boundaries needed to be properly demarcated, because the problem in Northeast is that there is always overlapping of territories. There is no territory exclusively belong to any community. The village, within the Kuki areas, there are Naga villages, and in Naga areas, there are Kuki villages. And but this autonomy demand, apart from the ground situation, is likely to get further boost, because the center is, as we all know, the center is trying to implement its decision to create an autonomous territorial council in neighboring Nagaland. This 6 eastern districts of this territorial council will comprise the state's 6 eastern districts of Mon, Tuensang, Longlang, Kifire, Samator, and Noklak. So once this autonomous council is created, this will have a natural fallout in Kuki areas of Manipur. They would now naturally ask why the same policy would not be, not be applied in the Kuki-dominated areas of Manipur. More so at a time when the center is talking so much about uniformity. So why not, the uniformity here? There cannot be 2 year states for the tribal groups in Nagaland and the tribal groups in Manipur. So in the coming days, definitely, definitely this autonomous district councils demand is definitely will get space and get momentum. So this proposed frontier Naga territory, I think, will be the next big development to be watched out for. This is what I have to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Pulkasthi. You brought out very well the complexity that arises because of neighboring Nagaland and also the other states. Now, the last speaker from the panel is Brigadier N.S. Mukherjee. I see Mr. Subir Bhaumik has raised his hand, but can we take the question after? No, that's okay. That was okay. Brigadier Mukherjee, please share your thoughts.
I just have to leave, Join Sada. It's not a question.
Thank you so much for being with us.
I think Mr. Bhaumik could speak. I mean, if he has some last words, Mr. Bhaumik, you might like to share some last thoughts before you leave.
Yeah, well, I need to, dwell a bit on this Burmese drug scenario and how it relates to the drug traffickers in Manipur. Recently, Samir briefly referred to it, Itocha drug cartel, 2 of their people, and both are Meitei gentlemen, or rather ungentlemen, if I may say so, traveled all the way with a full vehicle full of drugs from Manipur by road with the car registered in Assam all the way to Delhi, where they were arrested. So this gives a lie to the fact, and the arrest has been demanded by the CADA and all these people. So, and these guys, to the best of my knowledge, because I follow the Burmese drug scene, there are 3 Burmese drug cartels which are on the Indo-Myanmar border. They've been shunted out of the Golden Triangle years ago, decades ago actually, by Kunsha and the United Wa State Army. Kunsha Maungtai Army is the king of the heroin, and United Wa State Army is the king of amphetamine and other synthetic drugs. These 3 cartels, Jiang Zemin, former Burmese Communist Party Commissar, Lo Shin Nien, ethnic Chinese plus Shan, and the Wei brothers, again ethnic Chinese plus Shan. These 3 cartels are active on the India-Myanmar border. And this Itocha drug cartel is linked to the Wei brothers. Now, one of the Wei brothers, Wei Chao Long, was killed 20 years ago by Kunsha when he tried to make a deal for re-entry into the Golden Triangle. Since then, these 3 Burmese drug cartels, smaller compared to Kunsha and others, have moved to the Indo-Myanmar border. The reason they have started coming into Manipur and other states of Northeast bordering Myanmar to encourage tribals to plant poppy is because of the civil war situation in Myanmar. They are having great difficulty accessing their own poppy fields. And India is a big market. So why not get Indian farmers to plant poppy and then shift processing units here so that they can access the Indian drug market properly? Sometimes civil war-like situation creates problem for these traffickers because they don't know, they have problems moving their merchandise. So this is the situation. And I know for a fact, I just bring up Tanaujam Brinda, my dear Manipuri sister, police officer, who was forced to resign from Manipur police because he was on the verge of arresting somebody, which Gautam actually referred to, very high up. Somebody very close to one of the top ministers of Manipur. So here, the Burmese drug scene and how it relates to Manipur, this is the way it does, and it will be extremely unfair to blame cookies. Yes, the cookie community, Churachandpur area, you have had Noor Dinglian in the past, a minister who was actually murdered because of the fight between the drug cartels. I myself was threatened by drug traffickers. But I'll finish here by saying that I don't have to add any more thing, and it has been a day of excellent presentations. Gautam, Samir, GK Pillever, it's lovely, Mr. Ambassador Ralte. It has been a pleasure hearing everybody. I have to leave because I have something else to do to catch flight. So thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Bhaumik. Now, Brigadier.
Joyanto, I'd like to say a few words before Nilu.
Right, sir. Go ahead, sir.
A few points which I feel have been left out, which are very important, and which Nilu also needs to comment on where necessary. Firstly, no hard measures can be taken unless President's rule is imposed.
Right.
I think it is mandatory to impose President's rule.
Absolutely.
To ensure that the Mera Paibis do not interfere, at least 3 women CRPF or BSF battalions need to be brought in to keep them under control if they try to interfere. There must be a total clampdown to locate all the looted weapons and unauthorized weapons that have come into Manipur. The leaders of all the fanatical sections must be arrested at the earliest. As soon as these measures have been taken, then you can afford to start talks and have a peace committee functioning. Armed Forces Special Powers Act needs to be reimposed. Without that, neither Assam Rifles nor the army can be effective, nor for that matter the BSF. Action must be taken, as brought out by earlier speakers, against all those who are culpable for the present state of affairs. I must also suggest that a change of governor may well be required in order to bring in either a very competent IAS officer or a very competent police officer or an army officer who knows Manipur backwards as the governor to deal with the present problem. Total freedom must be given to the security forces acting through a unified command to deal with the problem. If things are not nipped in the bud now, we are going to have very serious problems and going back to serious insurgency issues very soon. The hate campaign has to stop. The central government must post the best officers they have to the administration of the Manipur government so that governance improves. Development must be given a very high fillip. These are the points I wanted to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your intervention, sir. Brigadier Mukherjee, would you like to share your views now?
Yes, please. Firstly, good afternoon to all panelists and the larger participating audience today who are listening into this webinar. I will briefly be talking about the larger security concerns for national security, especially when a sensitive border state of the northeast of our country is destabilized due to multiple reasons. Now, the participating audience today would have noticed that amongst the many probable causes of this destabilizing ethnic violence that is taking place in Manipur, there is some dissent even within the participants amongst a number of issues which would have resulted in this ethnic violence. One of them being the issue of illegal immigration. Why I'm highlighting this is, you would have noticed certain participants saying that, for instance, Mr. Samir had pointed out that even a committee which went into this illegal Kuki migrants which are there found that approximately 2,000 odd were illegally there. Whilst General Himalaya had mentioned that over a period of time from something like 300 villages, the mushrooming of Kuki villages have gone beyond 3,000, although he laced it with another observation by saying that these Kuki villages were very small. So there is definitely an issue of illegal immigration. They might have been here for years and years, but it has to be regularized and legitimized. The perception among the general populace is that there is illegal migration and there is large tracts of jungle land which has been occupied by these illegal migrants, and that they have, because of lack of employment and lack of generation of meaningful employment, they have gone into Kuki cultivation. I have some figures which I have gleaned. Others have touched upon it. Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay also mentioned this. Among a research article that I have gleaned from Dr. Deepika Singh, she has gleaned figures from the Narcotics and Affairs Border Special State Anti-Drug Unit, which states that with a total of 13,121.8 acres, which was under cultivation, poppy cultivation in 2017 to 2023, the Naga community reported 2,340 acres of poppy cultivation. Other communities accounted for nearly about 35 acres. But as of now, the state reported 15,496 acres of poppy cultivation. In Sun, Manipur has spread across 15,400 acres of land in the hills between 2017 and 2023 for poppy cultivation. Another thing which we must notice is, where is the Chinese role in all this? China has been aggressively engaged in Golden Triangle poppy trafficking that occurs in the Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand. They have now taken control. The intelligence agencies report that it is a matter of grave security concern that activities of the Golden Triangle have now shifted to the Northeast India, particularly Manipur. And the current drug economy in Manipur is directly or indirectly controlled by people with China connections with the help of illegal migrants. So therefore, I would like to bring forward three different issues which concern national security. One is, if any state of the Northeast is destabilized, it strikes at the economic vitality of that entire area in terms of domestic and international tourism, in terms of free movement of goods and trade, and in terms of the economic activity that is generated normally in the 7 states in the Northeast. Secondly, the sovereignty of the nation is also at a threat. If something happens to the northern border, you will appreciate that large amount of troops can be tied down here in these northeastern states for them to unable to play their role in the northeastern deployment. And therefore, it is within the realm of not only possibility, but within the realm of the charter of duties of the intelligence agencies and the powers that be of China and ISI to make sure that they interfere in these areas and take control of these small and big gangs which are operating in this area, trafficking in all sorts of illegal activities, right from drugs to illegal arms, and to running a parallel economy in some of these states. So therefore, I personally feel that amongst the many recommendations that the panelists have given, two things absolutely come to my mind. One is what General Himalaya mentioned, that effective force has to be used at this juncture to bring in quick normalcy in the region. And the second is what Mr. Bhaumik mentioned, that you cannot have suddenly 4,500 arms disappear from the armories of armed police and paramilitary forces and the army without somebody being made accountable. And the third aspect is what General Mukherjee suggested, that there has to be some heads which have to be knocked off and some new authorities brought in to take control of the situation. The entire Northeast is likely to be destabilized if early action is not taken as of this juncture. And to only say that this is just an ethnic violence would be absolutely the wrong thing to, because there are many external forces definitely at the moment looking for opportunities to further fuel this entire region. And I make an explosive further, should I say, statement that if you would have noticed that the church has great outreach in the social media, and there has been a great outreach by the church across the world in social media during the last month or so of violence, of what is happening to the Christian community here in Manipur. On the other hand, you will notice the state and the central government doing nothing much and letting the things run their own course here. So is it a conflict between the RSS and the Christian community? I do not know, but this has got to be looked at from that angle too. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier Mukherjee. Now I find that Mr. Purkasi, you got your hand up, but can we ask Mr. Rupin Sharma, DGP Nagaland? He's got his hand. Can he be connected, Brigadier Mukherjee? This is Mr. Rupin Sharma.
I'll just check, sir. I'll just check.
Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear
you.
Yes,
we can hear you. We can hear you, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you very much, sir. I joined a bit late. I won't comment too much on other things, the details, but 2-3 things. One is there is a definite case for governance to improve in general. Overall governance in the systems needs to improve in general in Northeast, in Manipur, Nagaland in particular. Secondly, I think the policing in Nagaland, Manipur, probably Meghalaya, Mizoram also, is at a very nascent stage. I think definite efforts have to be made to revamp, restructure, and strengthen the policing in this area, because in most of these conflict situations, it is the police which will be the first responder. A third thing which I would want to mention is from my personal experience. This is from Bosnia, where I was a police monitor and a deputy regional commander. I think Bosnia was as much divided on ethnic lines as Manipur is now. And we had a situation where people from the Bosnia, Croat and the Serb communities would not sit in the same room, even in the same police station or the office. Now, we are probably fast looking at a situation here in Manipur where something like this could evolve if it is not already there, because the divisions are very stark. I think we could look at an internal Dayton Peace Accord or something where we have to force the communities to sit together and work together for the larger good of the state and the country as such. I think there is a proper model in place of how things took shape in Bosnia in the Dayton Peace Accord. What were the duties of the police monitors or the UN. I'm not saying UN police observers need to call in, but there's a definite case for some non-Manipuri oversight over how to have an inclusive governance and policing model in Manipur. So I think that is one area, because within the communities, like I would not cast any aspersions on either community. Even if people say that there are some conspiracy theorists who would say that Meiteis gave weapons to Meiteis and cookies to cookies and all that nonsense. I personally don't believe in that conspiracy theory. It's just that the police people who were guarding those armories and the police stations, they were confronted by mobs from their own communities. So the question for them was to whether to save lives by not firing or to allow the ammunition and the arms to go. So it's a very difficult decision to make. But I would still suggest that there is, again, Dayton Peace Accord could be a starting point, not necessarily a UN oversight, but a definite external oversight from a non-Manipuri constituent, if I could say, who could look at integrating the communities in Manipur. And it's not just because of this problem in Manipur, but if a lot of people who are there in this panel and in this group would realize that Manipur and Nagaland, probably most of the Northeast divisions between the ethnicities and communities are very, very deep, and it would take effort to bridge those gaps. I think we have sort of allowed things to proceed on their own for the gaps to be bridged, but there is a case in point for policy decisions on these so that the gap can be bridged faster. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma. And your perspective as a police officer who has long years of service in the region certainly had a new perspective. Mr. Purkasthar, is your hand up?
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I'll just like to point out that this proliferation of cookie villages in itself cannot be a pointer to the rise of illegal migrants in the state, because if we see the landholding system of the cookies, Zo cookie communities, the village belong to the chief, and often it happens that the chief and after the chief died, it passed on to the elder son of the chief. So it often happens that
Mr. Purkasthar, you have got muted. Somehow you got muted. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah. So I was saying that the proliferation of cookie villages in itself is not the point. Cannot be the indicator of illegal migrants from influx of illegal migrants from Myanmar. Because if we see the landholding system of the cookies, it is such that village belongs to the chief, and then it's passed on to the elder sibling of the elder son of the chief. So after the demise of the chief, it often happens that the other sibling of the chief break away from the parent village and set up new villages. So the population is actually shift from one village to another. It's not necessarily that they are coming from outside. And but having said so, I'm not denying that there is no infiltrations from across the Myanmar, but the number, as the house to house survey conducted by Manipur government found out that only 2,000 odd people came from across the border. So this figure is definitely not as large as it's been projected. Secondly, General Mukherjee rightly talked about the need to rein in these hate mongers. But the problem is that when the hate is propagated from top, the people in the high places, who will rein them? Who will bell the cat? It is now it has become a political culture to stereotype a community, to badmouth a community. So these political cultures need to be kept somewhere. Unless and until we do this, today it's Manipur, tomorrow it can be anywhere else. So and then another point was raised about looting of the arms. When in this kind of charged atmosphere, when this constant injection of hate has converted the entire community almost like suicide bombers, what police can do if if a groups of 5,000, 7,000 people raid the armories? So there are this situation is much more complex than what we tend to think. That's my observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Purkar. So, Brigadier Mukherjee, are there any questions that you're getting in your chat box? Here, I have only got one comment by Mr. Rupin Sharma. Do you have any other questions in the chat box that are not with me?
No, sir. No
Okay.
at the moment is. But
All
just
right.
let me have another look. If there is any, I'll just have a.
Oh, Mr. Rao.
There is.
Just one more. I see Mr. Rao has raised his hand. So we yield the floor to Mr. Rao. Mr. Rao, go ahead.
And then there are two more in the chat boxes which we'll come to later.
All right, first Mr. John Rao. Go ahead, Mr. Rao.
Yeah. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, Sam. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Good afternoon to all of you. There's just two things. We have two groups of people with arms in their hand. So just saying that we're going to take tough measures and get them to put the arms down is not likely to happen. So I would recommend that we should call for a ceasefire, which gives respectability to these people with arms, that they will keep quiet for a while till the peace process starts off. And I have a question for the panelists. It is common knowledge that all the politicians enjoy the patronage of the insurgent groups, whether in the valley or in the hills. And they do nothing unless the militant groups, they orchestrate things to be done. The politicians depend heavily on them to win their elections, and post-elections give them contracts or whatever you have. So how are we going to address weaning away the politicians from the influence of these armed militants who are actually running the state? So today, even if Mr. Biren Singh wants to take a softer line, he's not able to do it because the valley militants are not going to let him. Similarly, the elected representatives of the cookies are not able to, are going to stick with the separate administration demand because they are not able to reason with the armed groups. So that is the main problem to bringing peace in the state, weaning away the politicians from these armed groups.
The point is taken. We'll ask the panelists later. Now, I find Mr. Kamaljeet Singh has raised his hand. Mr. Kamaljeet Singh, Brigadier Mukherjee, can we connect Mr. Kamaljeet Singh? Hello.
I can hear you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I am Lieutenant General KJ Singh, and I had good fortune to serve in Nagaland and Manipur. My basic issue is that initially people used to prefer to live in Imphal Valley. Everybody took up a job there, made their houses there, and more affluent people went to Silchar or preferred to go to Guwahati, or even super rich made their houses in Delhi, and it applied to all communities. Chingmoirang had Nagas and Cookies had their own bastis. Now, sir, when and how this even people who had jobs in hills employed proxy workers, and NSC and IM used to arrange it, and they used to share the salary to some pre-arranged formula. I have seen documents of that arrangement when I was serving there, and that must be carrying on. How and when did this shift take place that we suddenly want to now go to hills, take up those areas? And if we are doing it, why are we doing it selectively? Why can't it be done across the board so that it appears non-partisans?
Thank you, sir. That's a very interesting observation. I see Mr. Gautam Mukhopadhyay, who wanted to leave early, has raised his hand. Gautam, are you still around? Yeah. Go ahead, Gautam. Go ahead.
Just very quickly, thank you to all the participants, and of course to Seners Kolkata, particularly headed by General Johnny Mukherjee, for this extraordinary event. I think it was a very high quality event. Excellent interventions by everyone. Before I leave, just one point, since Mr. Samir Puryakast took the trouble to explain a little bit about the cookie landholding. I should add, that one is the aspect of how property is transmitted in the cookie system. But there have been other stresses as well. One of them has been that, post the Naga cookie clashes, there were a lot of displaced cookies who moved out from areas where, they were moved out. And in fact, they were hosted by village chiefs in different areas, and they were allotted land. And that put pressure on a lot of forest land as well. So this is one thing. Secondly, another thing that had happened was that, under schemes, government schemes, which involved job cards, this whole phenomenon of Manrega villages came up, where in fact villages began to be set up in order to be able to tap Manrega funds. The key point is that in all these cases, and even in the case of the so-called illegal migrants from Myanmar, we can't really point out to, let's say, villages settled and inhabited by illegal migrants. In all cases, they were either hosted by the villages themselves, and these were essentially in cookie lands. They were not in lands that were outside the cookie control. So I just wanted to add a little to that understanding about why 300 villages could have become 3,000 villages or more. Not that I'm justifying it, but I think just this was a kind of demographic transition that has been taking place. So I think with those points, and with my thanks to everyone, I would like to take leave of this session, because I have another talk at 1 o'clock, which is a very hard commitment, and I'm the main speaker there.
Thank you for being with us, Gautam, despite your commitments. Colonel B.K. Gandhi has raised his hand. Can you please connect him, Brigadier Mukherjee? Colonel B.K. Gandhi.
Colonel Gandhi, you're on.
Yeah.
Colonel Gandhi, please make
No,
your...
I can hear you all. I hope you all can hear me.
Yes, we can all hear you.
Clearly, sir. Please go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I am Colonel B.K. Gandhi. I had the fortune of commanding a battalion in Manipur in 1991. We have talked about the tough measures. Why we haven't given a thought to the SAI operations? Because the tribals, as we all know, not very easy to handle them with tough measures. Perhaps tough measures as well as the PSYOPs can bring in some good results. My second observation is why the state government or the central government has so far remained blind to the aspect that the women and children are acting as the walls in the conduct of operations by the security forces. Why the women battalions of the CPF have not been inducted so far? It's very important, because now this trend will become universal. I can assure you, looking at the model of Manipur, you will find the similar kind of model being replicated as and when, God forbid, if the situation arises in any of the northeastern states. That will pose further problems. These are my 2 points I thought I'd share with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colonel Gandhi. Well, we have, I think, time for one more question, either from the panelists or from, before we hand over to Air Chief Marshal Raha. Is there any other question that's pending? Brigadier J.S. Bawa. Brigadier J.S. Bawa, can you please connect Brigadier J.S. Bawa?
Brigadier Bawa, if you could put your video on. We have you connected, Brigadier Bawa. If you unmute yourself, please unmute yourself and get your cameras on. You still Muted.
If
Am I audible?
about the camera,
Yes,
don't worry. Just get
Am I
just
audible?
unmute yourself.
Okay, yes, you're on. Please, we are able to hear you. Please on.
All right. First and foremost, thank you so much to General Mukherjee and the entire lot of panelists. We couldn't have asked for a better treat. An outstanding exposition on the problems of Manipur, from history to the present to the recommendations. One small observation that I have is that, let's say at a slightly later stage, we are into negotiations and making peace between the two warring sides. You may also like to look at the inevitable law of Lebensraum. As we all know, the Meiteis, they are the major stakeholders of the valley with very little floor space. Would it be in order to let them expand a little, while at the same time giving autonomy to the entire tribal belt? Not cookies alone, the others as well. But Lebensraum, give room to these people to expand a little. They are getting constricted and they will get more constricted with time. Thank you.
Jayanto, I'd like to say a few things.
Sir, just one moment, sir. We've just one more speaker from the outside. Then I'll hand over to you. Is Arpit Sachdeva? Arpit Sachdeva? Arpit Sachdeva connected. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, I'm the G1 Ops of 57 Mountain Division, sir. My question relates to, because we are seeing a lot of, there were a lot of eminent panelists who have given wonderful suggestions. However, when we are connected with the grassroots levels, where the people are actually operating. So what my query is that, for example, there was an IRB guy who refused to give weapons and who actually followed orders and shot at the perpetrators. These guys went to his home and burned his house. Like, for example, such sort of incidents. How do you ensure that all these suggestions which are taken at strategic level have an impact at the grassroots level, when these guys cannot go against, when the police guys or these guys, they cannot go against their own population for the fear of their own safety, for any other reason whatsoever? Thank you, sir.
That's from the ground, Colonel Sachdev. Thank you so much. Sir, General Johnny, you wanted to say something before we hand over to Chief Marshal
A few points
Raha.
in reply to the points raised by General Kamaljeet, Colonel Rao, and Colonel Sachdev, and Brigadier Bawa. Firstly, as far as southern Manipur is concerned, everybody's vying for it because all the money is there. This is money power. And unless it's brought under control, you're going to have continuous violence related to southern Manipur. Last time I went into southern Manipur, I warned the Assam Rifles CO over there that as per my information, they're gunning for you, the drug lords. So General KJ asked, why are people trying to push out the cookies? Why is everybody trying to vie for getting into the hills? That's the reason. All the money is coming through that area. Thousands and thousands of crores. The second point was regarding politicians interfering due to links to the militant groups. Of course, they all have links. There's no doubt about it. Otherwise, this couldn't have happened. And the only way to control it is bring in president's rule with an outsider being the governor controlling things. But an outsider who knows Manipur backwards. And as I said, he could be from the IAS or the IPS or the army. But somebody strong and capable of handling the situation has to come in. As far as Colonel Sachdev's point is concerned, yes, of course, they'll be worried. Everybody is worried, those who come from the area. about opening their mouth. The IB officers, I am told, didn't report because they were told, we're going to kill you if you leak out the information of what is going to happen. So you're going to have to think of measures wherein perhaps it's the army and Assam Rifles which will have to take the lead role in carrying out raids to seize these weapons, seize the leaders. You have to arrest the ringleaders. BK, any point you raised? BK, did you raise a point?
Sir, I had mentioned 2 points. Firstly was the why we are not thinking of carrying out the PSYOPs along with the measures that you're suggesting. Second is what could be the reason why the CAPF women forces have not been inducted?
I've already said that we have to bring in at least 3 women CRPF battalions.
Because this will set a precedent for the other states. God forbid tomorrow something happens, they will use a similar kind of modus operandi to conduct, to stop the armed forces to conduct any raid and search operations, etc.
Sir, may I intervene? May I intervene here?
Welcome, John.
PRO Defense Kohima has raised a hand. Please connect him, Brigadier Mukherjee.
Right.
PRO Defense, are you connected?
Yes, sir. Good morning to all, sir. It has been quite an enlightening morning for me as well, sir. I look after the public relations from the Ministry of Defense perspective of Manipur, Nagaland, and rest of Arunachal Pradesh, sir. Though most of the points have been already addressed, sir, and however, the role of media I wanted to highlight, that is what my bread and butter also is. So 2 issues. One is the restriction on the passing of information to the rest of the nation. I think it is a very good issue wherein things are being controlled and only the relevant issues have been highlighted by the national media. However, on the contrary, the regional or the state media, sir, they also have a divide in between, sir. They have also biased reporting, sir, and that has created a lot of scope and space for the for the propaganda machinery to come in, sir. So I know that there are eminent journalists on the panel, so if you can comment on that, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, may I?
May I just take 1 minute? 1 minute to.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Right. Colonel Gandhi raised a point regarding this model of women coming in front with children and all that, and creating barricades for the military operations to go through. This is not something new. I don't want to, of course, lower this webinar into a ground level tactical, response to this kind of a thing, but this was amply there in the valley during the peak of militancy when I was also commanding a battalion. And let me just share a small thing with all those who are participating. And this seems to be a major problem now in Manipur. We requisitioned a small dog squad, just 3 dogs, just 3 attack dogs with long leashes. And believe you me, I don't want to go into the minor tactics. We solved this problem in the entire area of Ganderbal, Manasbal, and Patan, the absolute epicenters of militancy in those days, in a matter of just days. So you might like to try that. Thank you.
Right, sir. That's fine. Mr. Purkasta, do you want to respond to PRO Defense's question or not?
Yes. So he has raised very valid point. See, when the society has become so polarized, media being a part of this, you cannot expect media to be, beacon of this thing, beacon of hope. I know some media personalities in Manipur who tried to be neutral, and they got threat calls and all these things. So the situation is so polarized. Even the media has,
Understood. I understand you're saying the situation. Yeah. Now we have one last question from Mr. Vijay Chibbar, the IS. Brigadier Mukherjee, could you please connect him? After that, we'll hand over to Air Chief Marshal Raha.
Thank you, Jayanto. Mr. Chibbar, you're on.
Thank you so much. Firstly, compliments to the entire panel. I think it's been a collection of wonderful ideas and I think very deep understanding. It's obvious that all of you have a very close attachment and a deep understanding of the region and Manipur in particular. But I was just wondering, we are all, sorry, I must introduce myself. I'm Vijay Chibber. Manipur is my cadre, or was my cadre. And I have spent about 20 odd years out of my total government civil service life of about 37 years. So I think I do know the state a little bit. But I was just wondering, all these wonderful ideas and thoughts and inputs, whom are we aggregating these ideas for? Because essentially I see this as a political problem, and there are enough ingredients already in the last 65 days which would have warranted a introduction of a president's rule. But for some reason, the policymakers in Delhi, there is some hesitation to go down that route. And that gets me thinking, are we missing something here? Because obviously there's been enough violence, there's been enough destruction to introduce the major corrective steps. And the first step obviously has to be something like a president's rule. But why is it not happening? So all these wonderful ideas are there, but who's the audience? Whom are we trying to convey to? Because the political thought process in Delhi doesn't seem to be getting engaged with the ground realities that all of you have alluded to. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. That was that actually you hit the nail on the head, and hopefully this will be heard. Even beyond these panelists. Now we have to call an end to this webinar. 1 o'clock was the time, and I hand over to Air Chief Marshal Raha to say the last final words.
Thank you, Jayanto. Can you all hear me? Yes, sir, we can. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a very long session of almost 3 hours to discuss the Manipur crisis. And to my mind, it has been a very wonderful webinar. And we have heard so many eminent speakers from various walks of life who have exceptional domain knowledge and have been exposed at the ground level in the region. Their analysis, therefore, which is based on personal experience in the region, based on facts, and of course, authentic knowledge, therefore, carries a lot of weight. And as somebody pointed out, that we need to take it up with the relevant authorities for consideration of the recommendations for implementation. And that's what the CNSK will do. The esteemed speakers included very senior veteran army officers with tremendous exposure in the Northeast, DGP level IPS officer. We had IAS officers who served Indian government as the Home Secretary, as also the Chief Secretary of Manipur State itself, eminent journalists whose battleground has been the Northeast in the past and presently, and of course, a few foreign service officers as well. To my mind, the speakers have actually incisively, dissected the problem at great length and have given us the genesis of the problem, not only over the last several decades after independence, but also going back historically into many centuries backwards to make us understand the problem. They've also covered the immediate reasons for the flare-up in Manipur, and more importantly, you all have given us the solutions that needs to be implemented, or recommendations to be implemented to get a solution to the problem. So after having listened to all the speakers, I think I'm more knowledgeable, more enlightened about the Northeastern region and its problems.
And I really do not have many points to add to the rich inputs that you have received so far during the discussions. So I am going to basically give you the synthesis of the deliberations for the last 2.5 hours or so. The first point that comes to my mind is that the ground reality in the northeastern region, which includes, of course, Manipur, is very, very complex. The people divided by ethnicity, tribal, non-tribal, plains, hills people, religion, and certain extraneous factors like corruption and coercion and extortion, as also, poppy culture and narco-terrorism have only added to the difficult situation in the Northeast region. Northeast region is actually a tinderbox, which could go up into flame just with a small spark or a catalyst. And that is what has happened in Manipur, to my mind. Secondly, I think the relationship between the central authorities, be it post-independence or prior to independence during the British colonial rule, with that of the ethnic groups and the peoples in these states of northeastern region have been more or less, adversarial. As a result, this situation over a prolonged time has given rise to insurgencies from time to time. I can quote that in 1915-1917 period, the Britishers tried to subdue the insurgency of the Cookies. That is known as the Anglo-Cookie War, 1915 to 1917. That is almost a century back. From time to time in the past, we have heard and seen that there has been a lot of friction, a lot of violence, inter-ethnic clashes, and also other anti-social, anti-national activities there. But from 1990s, to my mind, the region saw multiple inter-ethnic clashes or conflicts, like the Kuki Naga, Kuki Karbi, Meitei Muslims conflict, etc. And we all know that people in the region, especially people living in the hills and tribals, are very, very ferocious fighters. And for them, tribal identity and allegiance is paramount. The main reason for the fight is land, as was brought out, resources, identities, and also a fight against discrimination, perceived or true, whatever it may be, in various forms, with the majority over the minority, by one ethnic group against the other, one religious group against the other. So these are the problems. That's why the fight is. The fight is also for jobs and livelihood. Drugs, narcotics trade, or narco-terrorism, easy monies through, criminal activities like extortion, coercion, etc., have only added fuel to the fire. Next is that rule through, cash and doles by the central agencies, central authorities, has made the center complicit in buying off ethnic elites, allowing them to siphon off large amount of central funds meant for development of this region, and perpetuate extortion, thus weakening the institutions and actually damaging the activities towards development of infrastructure and other facilities in the region. And actually, the law enforcing agencies have become very weak, especially the police, because in this environment, they find it very difficult to keep their morale high. They've lost their bearings. They have lost the will to fight. And of course, they have become very ineffective, which we saw or we are seeing during this turmoil. Even the Indian Army has been constrained to act against the extortionists, the insurgents, because of the high level of patronage by political authorities or protection provided by them to these culprits. So extortion and insurgency has actually grown into an industry in our northeastern region to garner more central funds for their own use, which is a fact. Even the Indian Army has been maligned through orchestrated campaigns from time to time. And we all know that resentment against the Indian Army in the Thangjam Manorama case, in the past. Political violence as well as ethnic cleansing in our neighboring countries have actually resulted in influx of refugees in the northeastern states and thus given rise to ethnic tensions and increased drug trafficking, thus adding more fuel to the fire. The borders with our neighbors, basically Myanmar and Bangladesh, passes through very difficult terrain, hilly region, riverine terrain, and this area is densely forested, basically tropical forest, almost impregnable. In addition to the climatic conditions and terrain conditions, we also have the problem of trans-border population of the same ethnicity across. So that also has its implications in preventing the border being porous. So all these reasons have actually made border management unmanageable. The current violence, of course, can be attributed to, say, intelligence failure, and if the intelligence was available, due to lack of action or inaction by the government and the authorities, including the police, or complicity, like the case of armories being looted by this arsonist, wherein there was no action by the police. And in fact, they actually helped them to carry out this arson of large quantities of weapons. And the partisan behavior has been very, very evident during this turmoil. Instead of dousing the fire, they have been actually helping add fuel to the fire. Therefore, the loss of trust of the people in the authorities and the government has been total, and that will take a long time to correct, to my mind. Let me now list out the remedial actions and the solutions as suggested by the panelists. I'll add a few of my own as well. Firstly, there is no alternative to institution building and rule of law. The leaders of these insurgencies in the Northeast have actually manipulated the ethnicities and identities aspects as tools to spread large-scale violence, as also spread disaffection among various communities for their own, narrow objectives and gains. Secondly, equitable economic prosperity, which would emphasize on good education, creation of jobs and employment, and of course, politics that looks beyond the ethnic construct. These aspects could have actually built a different and benign northeastern region. Third point is devolving power, which was discussed by various panelists and the people who asked questions. This devolving power would have helped remove the conflicts in the entwined communities in the region. This is besides the breaking up of the entire Northeast region into small states. Any further division is not welcome. The dichotomy of our democracy is that the electoral and political processes or discourse has served to harden and consolidate antagonistic ethnic, religious identities instead of uniting the people for the good of the state, good of the region, or good of the country. Appeasement of vote banks for winning elections to retain power or come into power has become an end in itself, forgetting that the government has to work for the good of everyone, not only those who voted for them, but also others who did not. This important aspect, this important responsibility of a democratic government has been lost sight of, because nowadays we have a number of criminals who have become politicians, and we don't have good leaders. We don't have statesmen all across the Indian, I think, scenario. And Manipur is a very important, I would say, gateway for our connectivity with Myanmar and the rest of Southeast Asia. As people mentioned, Moreh is actually is a gateway for the Asian Highway 1, which connects our northeastern region with Manipur and other parts of Southeast Asia. And therefore, stability of northeastern region, be it in terms of security environment, be it political and social environment, is very important for investment, development, and infrastructure creation and connectivity to the Southeast Asia for the success of our Act East policy, the foreign policy that we are trying to pursue to gain, influence and leverages in this region. It is also important, for the prosperity of the people of the northeastern region. And next point in the center, as was brought out by many speakers, cannot remain lackadaisical in ensuring peace and tranquility in this region. It has to act with firmness and sense of purpose and a willpower to enforce the rule of law. Rule of law has to be enforced, and they should restore and retain the confidence of the people in the government and the police. And lastly, the integration of the people of the region with the rest of India is an important aspect. I think the government should do more at the center to give greater opportunities for the youth of this region for jobs in central government institutions, agencies, ministries, be it paramilitary forces, police forces in large numbers, even the military forces, in the health sector, in various other ministries, in the railways, so that they get integrated and mainstreamed with the rest of India. As also giving opportunities, greater number of youths from the northeastern region to study in the best of institutions across India, so that they can find jobs all across the country in various sectors, and then you'll find their attitude will change a lot. They will seek, integration proper with India and not be influenced by the sectarian politics that you have in the northeastern region. And finally, all the recommendations that the panelists have given, especially General J.R. Mukherjee, needs implementation by the government at the center and the states in the region, which of course include, I would say, imposition of governor's rule, some removal or changes in the constitutional appointments in the region or in the state, setting up a reconciliation committee with outsiders so that there is impartial assessment and recommendations to be implemented, and of course strict action against the lawbreakers, the rioters. And we need to give more powers to the security forces to implement this. I have finished. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much. General Johnny, sir, would you like to say or should I thank everybody?
Thank you very much, all panelists, and over to you, Jayanto. All panelists and all participants, extremely grateful. Mr. Pillai, we'd be grateful if you could put across these points beside our recommendations.
Jayanto, you're muted.
You're muted.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of Senus K, I thank all the panelists and all those who shared their views from the audience. As Mr. Vijay Chibber so correctly mentioned, we lacked a political perspective here, but we'll do our best to put together the recommendations systematically and try to make sure it reaches the political power centers, both in the center and the state. Thank you all, but thank you very much. It's been such a pleasant, such an educative morning for all of us. I wish you well. Now we are all disconnecting.
Thank you.
Just one last word before we shut down. I just want to also record here our thanks to our technical support that has been given to us by Sinners K Special Staff Robert Harless. Thank you all.
Mr. Pillai wants to say a few words. Mr. Pillai, former Home Secretary.
Yes. Mr. Pillai, if you are there, Mr. Pillai, please unmute yourself.
I think he has just left.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. We're closing
Well
down.
done, Nelu.
Thank you, sir.